your best bet is to really just talk to someone and ask them, ask the guy at the pub. That's all you have to do. Just go to the pub and say, I'm new in town. What should I see? And each person, I guarantee you, will tell you something different.
Welcome to Locales Unknown. This podcast gives you the tools you need to choose your next travel destination and the tips you want to be able to explore like a local. Here are your hosts, Chris and Winfield.
Hello, everyone. Today we're here with Jevon. He's a friend of mine from law school, and we really go back a long ways. We've traveled in different places together, and he really has a lot of insights about his native Australia. There's quite a bit to see and do. It's really a continent of uncharted possibilities.
Yeah, I love this episode for sure. I mean, Australia is always one of those places that's high up on my list, full of amazement, full of adventure. And Jevon just does an incredible job of just giving us some history, talking about all of the various options available. And I really do think you guys will like it and have as much enjoyment as we did.
Without further ado, here's our interview with Jevon. Welcome to another episode of Locales Unknown. Today we have Jevon Saba. It just rolls off the tongue with us. My brother from another mother. And how's it going, man? I can't believe it's been 4 years now since we last saw each other in Fiji for a little tropical wedding.
It seems like it doesn't seem that long, yet it is. It's just one of those things. Like, unbelievable how much time goes by. We're both married, which is insane. And yeah, no, who would have thunk 4 years apart, man.
Indeed it is, man. And congratulations. Sorry I couldn't make your wedding. Unfortunately, things crop up as time goes by, but we've stayed in touch nonetheless. Today we're going to bring you some insight into Australia. I actually went to law school with Jevon, so yeah, I learned all about the Commonwealth's ins and outs, also their fantastic pub culture. But today, Jevon's going to bring some insights into all the above. So why don't you start us out with a brief kind of background / introduction about the country, how it was discovered, Terra Nullius, Mabo. Take it away.
Take it away. All right. Well, we usually, when we talk about Australia, we usually think of it as a very young country. But what a lot of people don't know is it's been inhabited by people for at least 50,000 years. And most people think it was discovered first by the British. The British were the first to land, but in 1606 it was discovered by the Dutch. And they didn't really form any government or anything like that. They were mostly just passing through. But then you get to 1788, the landing of the first fleet, at which time there are about 200 indigenous languages and dialects in place. And that really is the inception of what we talk about when we're referring to Australia. It's the settlement of the British. A lot of, there are unsavory aspects of that history. We don't really want to go into that all the full way, but so that's the key date, settlement. Then 1850s, you get the gold rush, which was the first and last time anyone ever found something of value in Bathurst. The Eureka Stocktake, rebellion against taxation. For an analogy, you guys have the Tea Party movement, something similar to that.
Indeed.
Then 1901, Federation, the establishment of what we call in our history books the White Australia policy, which was really at that time, I think motivated by like a sort of backlash to the gold rush, which saw an uptake in Chinese, Southeast Asian immigration.
Wasn't repealed until 1964 too. Sorry to cut in there, but I think that's a key point, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Repealed and definitely repealed and from like almost a decade after, we started to see massive changes in that too. Well, not a decade, maybe a couple of decades after, post World War, immigration really saw, I guess, a diversifying of the contours of Australian life, and a lot of changes there. But also, an important part about 1901 is the creation of Canberra. Indeed, a sad day for the entire nation, but
halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, exactly, right?
Yeah. And then, the 1967 referendum, which really saw a recognition of Indigenous people, and in population counts, and also enabling the federal government, as you would know from constitutional law, to make policies in respect of them. And then we get to the 1970s, which was another, I guess, watershed moment in our history, which saw massive sort of multiculturalism, people from everywhere, really just enriching the country with different foods, lifestyles, and that's been a part of our fabric ever since, really. And then 2008, 13 February 2008, Kevin Rudd, for the first time in our history, apologizes to the stolen generations. Bit of background about that is Indigenous people that were taken from their homes, brought into different homes as part of a mainstreaming process. But 2008 was an important moment in our history where a prime minister apologized for that. But really, I say all of that, that's just sort of the textbook history of our nation. Fundamentally, we're a nation of immigrants. And as we're a very young country, most Australians can trace their ancestry to another continent. And it's often only a few generations back. In my case, it's only one. In my wife's, it's two. So, we're just... We're all from somewhere else, which is beautiful, and we're all slowly beginning to embrace our nation's Indigenous heritage as well, in a way that previous generations haven't. And when I was studying history in high school, it seemed to me that it all started in 1788. But fortunately, school-age children today are moving beyond those narratives and starting to get a very holistic picture of our great southern land. So that's a very sort of, I'm not sure I did justice to our history, but that's the nutshell sort of glimpse into what we are and who we are.
Well, I'll be the first one to admit that I didn't know most of that. So I don't know if all of our listeners are going to be so well versed in Australian history. So I appreciate that. And I didn't want to interrupt the bromance before, because you guys have known each other for a while. And I know, Winfield, you spent multiple years down there, right?
Yes, I did. I was in Australia. First time I went down there was 2011. Started school down there in 2012. Finished up the end of 2014. So, lived in Australia on and off for about 3 years. And
that's awesome.
No, indeed, and I know you as well, Chris. You spent time on the Aussie's biggest rival over in Kiwi land.
Yeah, so we were actually just talking about that before we hit record, that the closest I got was either New Zealand, where, there was a big Australian influence there, but also in Kuta, Bali, where it just seemed to be like mini Australia. So I was saying how I absolutely love the natural spirit of adventure. And I didn't even mention before, Jevon, that I did some couch surfing in New Zealand, and I happened to just link up with an Aussie guy. Shout out to Christian. And we had a couple great days together. He put me up for the night. We actually went down, took a little road trip to Dunedin, which is one of the most southern towns in the South Island. Yep. And then just had an awesome time, and he kind of filled me in on a lot of day-to-day lifestyle that is in Australia. And I just love hearing about that. I haven't stepped foot outside of the Sydney airport, and I was half dead anyway. I got off of a 15-hour flight from LA. So I think in the horizon, there was a couple buildings, and I was like, okay, I need 45 minutes of sleep before my flight. And that was my experience so far in Australia. So that's why I didn't butt in the beginning there. You guys have a unique experience for sure. But it's interesting to hear there's a lot of similarities in both of our heritages, and also a recognition of the indigenous peoples that came before us and an appreciation more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I see the parallels all the time. I've spent quite a bit of time in the States. I haven't studied there in the way that Winfield studied in Australia, so I haven't quite had the insiders take. But yeah, no, I'd be interested to hear on what you sort of think are the parallels in our sort of origin story.
No, indeed. So I was the paradigm there is quite interesting because, for instance, the Yanks always love to give you a hard time about being a penal colony. But if you look at the history of the U.S., Pennsylvania was a penal colony as well, William Penn, right? So to your point, because Australia is obviously further away from the known world, at least at that time in the age of exploration, it's quite interesting. Basically the indigenous people of Australia walked from Africa, which is hard to believe. There was a land bridge between Papua New Guinea and Australia, so the Melanesian descent, and you can trace that directly back to our entire history of humanity in Africa. And just as Native Americans walked into North American continent by a land bridge that stretched from Siberia to modern day Alaska. So I think that the consistencies are very real, and they shouldn't be glossed over. And you hit upon some really interesting points there. I want to pick up a couple of them. So first of all, especially in the modern era, the multicultural aspect. I know that when we started law school together, it definitely seemed as if there was quite a melting pot, at least in Sydney, of cultures, even more diverse in some aspects than some of the big cities in the U.S. And what seemed to be more of, should we say, across ethnic boundaries in terms of friendships and in terms of communalism. Do you want to touch on that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's something that I've known, I guess, my whole life. And you certainly, when you're traveling around Sydney, what would really strike you if you're not from Sydney is that most of the places where you go to eat are not quintessentially Australian there, or what you would term as Australian. It's, there's a whole fleet of Asian restaurants. And even within that, there's variety. You get North Chinese, you get Southern Chinese, you get Northern Indian, Southern Indian. Basically, every variety of a cuisine is available in Australia, especially if it's in the Asia Pacific sort of region. And I think that itself is really a testament to the diversity and the extent to which we appreciate, I guess, the cultures that have really formed the post 1970s Australia. But even as Winfield was saying, groups and just different friendship groups that are formed tend to be very diverse. I mean, in the group that we formed in university, there was a Yank, there was myself, there was a Greek guy, there was everyone was really represented. And I think that itself is just I think it speaks to the fact that we don't really care where, at our best, we don't really care where people are from, and we're happy to really include people into the fold, regardless of how far you've traveled to be here. If you're here, the party's on us. Come and have a good time.
So in that same vein, kind of explain to us the Aussie zeal for travel, because whether it's Kentucky or otherwise, small population, a continent the size of the U.S. almost, with a desert in between, largest uranium deposits in the world. I mean, you just are so blessed with natural resources and obviously a very high standard of living, actually higher in terms of GDP per capita than the U.S. Or Canada even. So why would anybody ever want to leave? Why would they want to go outside of the greater island?
I think there's something fundamentally adventurous in our spirit, and it's an interesting question, and I don't really know how to answer that, even for myself. It's just sort of when you're so far removed from anything, you just really want to be, you really want to see other places and experience new things. And that's not to say we don't travel internally. We do, but also just the proliferation of American culture in Australian society is also a huge thing. And you'd probably notice if you go to most Australian households, American TV is consumed. It's Netflix, it's Amazon Prime. It's all of these things that really have formed almost part of our culture as well. And so because we're such a mishmash of different cultures, and we do experience those cultures within our own country, part of us wants to chase it to the source point. And I think that's why we have people that want to travel to Bali, because we've got a massive Indonesian population. We've got great Indonesian food and culture, but we want to trace it all the way to the point where it began, and we really want to experience that. And the same goes with American television and different things from American culture that we've borrowed. We want to see it all the way through and really know. And America is such a big, diverse nation as well that you're not really going to get the full scope of things unless you go there. And I think that really is part of the reason why we're so well traveled and why we do go to the ends of the earth, and you can hear us everywhere we go because of our accents and how loud we are. But that's I think that's really what I understand to be the reason. Yeah.
No, that's great indeed. And I think that there are several things there, and kind of a big small village syndrome to a certain extent. But even that, it doesn't necessarily capture the spirit, as you said, because there's so much to see within Australia, whether it's Three Sisters or all the different states. Just vast open, land. It's a lot of it is untouched, pristine. So take us through some of the highlights of where you would recommend to a new traveler from overseas.
Well, there's the bucket list of things that a lot of people do when they come to Australia, being, say, climbing the Harbour Bridge, snorkeling in the Great Barrier Reef, visiting the Three Sisters, as you mentioned. There's really a lot to see. You could get selfies with quokkas in Western Australia. There's really a whole host of things you can do, and animals and different native, say, flora and fauna that only exist in Australia and nowhere else. We've got koalas, you've got kangaroos, you've got all of those sort of things. But there's also things to do that a lot of people don't tout necessarily. We've got beaches that are the envy of the world, and when I say envy of the world, I don't mean just Bondi and the beaches that most people from overseas are familiar with or they've heard about. You've got Balmoral Beach. You've got beaches that we boast some of the most beautiful harbour beaches in the world as well. That are more secluded, more hidden, less talked about, but still you'd be remiss to miss. Like, it's just one of those things. Yeah. Just one of the favorite things, like one thing that I enjoy to do, is just go on nature walks and strolls, and we boast a lot of good national parks, and view and scenery. Just a whole host of things to do. Grab a flat white.
A must.
A must, and do the go just walk around Glebe for a bit, and you probably did that when you were around Sydney Uni. The whole the boardwalk, Blackwattle, just that whole area. So I think if you're traveling from abroad, and then this is subject to things opening up and really getting back to normal, your best bet is to really just talk to someone and ask them, ask the guy at the pub. That's all you have to do. Just go to the pub and say, I'm new in town. What should I see? And each person, I guarantee you, will tell you something different.
That sounds very similar to New Zealand as well. I remember I had my whole beginning of the trip planned out. I started in Queenstown, making my way north. And within a week, I canceled all the reservations that I had because everyone is just so open-hearted, very friendly. They're going to tell you what to do that is not in the guidebook, is not online, and it's a true valuable experience. And you brought up and kind of shed some light a little bit on the global pandemic that's going on right now. And dare I say that, again, I'm going to draw the comparison between the US and Australia, saying that we are so vast and diverse that we have to turn inward in this time because we are restricted on international travel. So being that you're already in country and you have the flexibility to move around a little bit, and I'm just making that assumption, I don't know how stringent the lockdowns are, but what would you say is the best way to get around? I mean, you have a whole desert in between you and all the way in the Northwest. So, what would you do for travel?
Yeah. Well, at this precise moment, we don't unfortunately have the freedom to travel far beyond our city or even our rate. We're sort of subject to a 10-kilometer radius. So the lockdown is sort of intense, as you guys are probably aware. Most of the world is sort of grappling with the Delta variant of COVID-19, and so that being the most virulent form has prompted, some governments, and ours included, to restrict us to a very narrow sort of radius. So we're pretty much just stuck to our own, communities and suburbs, subject to, say, going to work and things like that. If work from home isn't possible, but if you live in a nice enough, if you're fortunate to live in a nice enough part of town, that doesn't mean you can't go on, your walks, your beachside walks, go for a jog. You can still do things that you enjoy, just at a smaller scale. But what's really hard for us as a people is we're so big on experiencing things with other people, and that's where there's a bit of a problem in that, like, we can't experience fun stuff with our mates. We can't go to do a beach walk together and then follow it up with a drink at the pub. There are certain things that we've had to really dial back, and that really it's hard. And I mean, it's hard globally, but you try to see the good in it, and you try to really just experience your area as best as you can. You enjoy every inch of that 10-kilometer radius, and just go on your bike rides. I know that my wife and I like to do some bushwalks in our area, which is good, and also some sort of beach walks. And see, we live near. We're blessed to live near a bit of water, so you can enjoy that. And you see passers by. You can't interact too much, but say hi and just come back and chill. But it's that's the good thing, is that it's not permanent. It's one of those things that we just have to do now, and hopefully knock it on the head, and then we'll have the opportunity to really return to our lifestyle the way it was, and involving more than seeing other states, and that's what a lot of people were doing when we were on a sort of hybridized lockdown last year. It kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. We had the ability to travel around the nation, subject to wearing masks and social distancing requirements, but we got to go. I traveled out to the Southern Highlands, and just great wine culture, and just chilling and really going to great restaurants and seeing quaint Australian towns that were really sort of unaffected by modernization and tourism. And yeah, just experiencing a great chili pie. We have the hottest pies in the world. And I mean, you guys have a completely different definition of a pie, right? What do you guys
Totally
associate
different.
with pie?
Not the British version, not a savory pie.
Very different.
Sweet pie. Yeah.
Sweet pie all the way. But in everything, I mean, what you're describing, there's positives, you have to find it. And from my understanding and my experience and exposure with the Australian people, you guys are an optimistic bunch. And I would have to ask, being that Sydney and Australia as a whole is such an international place, what type of, I guess, what's the difference now that you've hit such a pause on the tourism? Is there any positives that have come out of this, maybe as far as environmental or anything that you've experienced?
Well, I mean, I've read sort of anecdotal things here and there about how it's benefited the environment with less tourism. I mean, which is intuitive, right? It makes sense that if you're not traveling around so much, then it's going to be better for the environment. I've read that the Great Barrier Reef has really benefited from that. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's one positive take on COVID-19 is that we tax the environment a little bit less. So we're not out there just going crazy, but it's hard to really point to anything beyond that really is positive, apart from maybe spending more time with your nearest and dearest, and then also learning to catch up with old friends in distant places, because you're chatting to Winfield now is the same as and chatting to you is the same as, say, chatting to a mate who lives 30 minutes away. It's the same. It's just as hard to get to him physically as it is to you now, almost, in some respects. So it's really, maybe it's enhanced even companies and their technological capabilities and really pushed them to the limit, where they've had to do things even like Winfield and I have a legal background. So even in terms of court, a lot of that's moved online. Like there's few, if any, face-to-face hearings, and a lot of just our economic climate has changed as well. Some for the worse, some for the better. But yeah, it's we're all grappling with this and really finding new ways to I guess enjoy our nation and enjoy life and enjoy the people around us. But yeah, I mean, I guess everyone's just waiting for the next phase and waiting for things to some form of normalcy to return. And the harder part is that we don't really, things are sort of indefinite at this stage. We don't know how long they'll be in effect. But as I mentioned, I mean, we've lived with COVID-19 for over a year now. In the last year, there was an opportunity to travel around our nation and really see different states that we hadn't been to. Some took the opportunity, others didn't. But yeah, I mean, that was, I think if we get back to a point where we're able to travel from one state to the other, then it won't be like we're living in the pre-Federation era that we're in now. It's sort of like warring states and that kind of stuff. And you hear the premiers. So the premier is basically like the equivalent of the senator, right? Governor. But you have them sort of talking about their state as if it's their nation. It's kind of, and we've never been like that as a country. We've been movement between states. We've had, it was so free before, where people would, it wouldn't really matter if you're a New South Welshman or a Victorian. You get to the pub and you talk about your opposing teams in the footy, but that's probably the extent of it, the extent of the rift. But now it's very political and hardline, and premiers are jumping down each other's throats. People are jumping down the Prime Minister's throat. So it's an interesting dynamic and time that we're living in.
Yeah, on a bit of a happier note, something you touched on earlier was wine. And Australia, if you like wine, Australia is kind of the one of the New World leaders. Some vines were brought from the Huguenots as they fled France, and various parts of the old world have been graced with but various parts of the New World have been graced with old world vines. So take us a bit through Margaret River, Hunter Valley, the Barossa, my personal favorite. You're just spoiled for choice. The Syrahs, the Chenin Blancs. You talked about some gastronomy also. Take us through some modern Australian cuisine and what that entails.
Well, we like it. We love our wine, and even as a Sydney cider, you do get the pick of the litter in terms of the greatest from the Barossa, from the Hunter Valley. The Hunter Valley being just a stone throw from Sydney. That's a popular trip to do, and you can stay at you can stay in town and visit wineries, and wineries are sort of repurposed into, well, not repurposed, but extended into larger than life restaurants where you can really just enjoy food, cuisine, and then all part of the experience. And you're bound to walk away with something. You're bound to walk away with a big, box full of wine that you then take back and enjoy over the week. And that's something that we really enjoyed in 2020, which was terrific. Like, it was just being able to travel there and bring back the Hunter into your living room was phenomenal. And so every variety, if you're more of if you like the lighter reds, we've got that in good measure. The full-bodied Shiraz, all of that, and in every sort of variety. So yeah, going on a wine tasting is probably one of the coolest things to do in the Hunter and in Australia in general. Just spending a boozy day, just going from winery to winery and enjoying every drop and every variety of it. And then in terms of, Winfield asked me about the cuisine. It's, as I was touching on a little bit earlier, the cuisine is so much a product of diverse cultures and just different. Modern Australian food is anything from a steak meal, steak and mash, to bangers and mash, sausages and mash, or pad thai even. A lot of that, if you go to a modern Australian restaurant, you get the variety is just endless, and you would think, oh well, that doesn't sound Australian, but I think it just speaks to how rich and diverse the nation is, and how we take a little bit of everything from everyone and kind of make it our own. And so yeah, and pies, obviously, savory pies, chunky steak pies, can't go wrong. And I don't know if you ever had the chance to go to Harry's Cafe de Wheels.
Yes.
Just a small pit stop, but you can get your chunky steak pie with mashed peas and potato on top. It's quite a treat. Yeah.
Woolloomooloo, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, they've got them around. But yeah, Woolloomooloo is like the flagship store. Yeah.
Right. Now that's right next to where Russell Crowe used to have a flat too, down there on that that lineup. It's that's a really nice area. Woolloomooloo, and then kind of transitioned into the Cross around there. Can get pretty dodgy at night, but it's a lot of fun in the Cross. At least back in the day. I don't know what it is now.
No,
but,
I work around the Cross, so I see exactly what you're talking about every day, and it's so interesting how you walk from one part of the city where it's just completely, almost Wall Street-esque, and you have people like Martin Place. You have all the people with their headsets closing deals, and then you go out to, say, Surrey Hills. It starts to get a little bit dodgier, but not quite there. And then the Cross is just full blown. Yeah, we have a very interesting city, as I'm sure you guys do in your own respective cities. But yeah,
plenty of them. So the Cross, that's a neighborhood in Sydney.
King's Cross. So it's sort of it's a cultural experience and an area within Sydney that has a famed history. In the 70s and 80s, it was sort of a crime hotspot. And you had a lot of mobsters that operated out of different establishments, bars, and things. And yeah, we have an interesting history in the 70s and 80s, but there was we're now learning a bit about our history that we didn't know before, and that we had a very infamous fire at Luna Park. And Luna Park is sort of our nation's kind of Disneyland, if you will, a lot smaller. But there was a suspicious fire there, and that was sort of linked to a crime. We originally thought it was spontaneous and sort of accident, but we're learning now that it could have been related to a criminal within the cross, and someone who's really was quite notorious back in the day. But yeah, that's again a not so savory aspect of our history. But the cross is definitely also a great cultural experience. Home to many bars and very popular during Mardi Gras season as well. And a lot of people, gay and straight, would go out there and celebrate on that day. So yeah, definitely a place that you shouldn't miss if you're a tourist, filled with rich history and also just great bars and vibes. So yeah.
Just to wrap up the food, we'd be remiss not to mention Vegemite and kangaroo and all of these gamey items. I know a lot of people in the States wouldn't be able to fathom the idea of eating a absolutely adorable marsupial, but
it's pretty delicious.
That it is, and it has a very gamey taste on the back end. It's really high in protein, low in saturated fat.
But just to clarify, I'm talking about the kangaroo, not the Vegemite, because that's not delicious.
You've had Vegemite before?
I don't know if I'm gonna say I've had the privilege or I've had the misfortune of trying it. Because,
definitely the latter.
Yeah, it does not agree with me. Let's just say that. But you guys love your Vegemite. Let's just say that.
Well, even within Australia, it's sort of like a mixed reception. Like, some people really love it. You either love it or you hate it. And so I like it. I'm a fan, but my wife hates it. And I think it's split down the middle. But it's such a massive part of our culture. I think Julia Gillard our Prime Minister gave some to Barack Obama when he visited, and he wasn't a fan, but
of course she did.
It's an acquired taste, I guess.
It's an acquired taste.
Yeah, one you have to grow up with more than anything.
Yeah. No, it was definitely on most of my sandwiches from say kindergarten to year 5. It was just one of those things. Very easy to do. Just slap it on, or on your crackers. I could just.
Right.
Good. I think we prefer peanut butter over here.
Right. I was just going to say, for our listeners that have no idea what we're talking about, it's basically a peanut butter consistency. It's a spreadable, for lack of a better word, it's a spreadable spread that just kind of goes on anything, and it's really quick and easy. But it has I would say, a noxious taste to it. But Jevon clearly disagrees wholeheartily. So we'll agree to disagree on that one.
Yeah.
But
have you seen it over here in stateside? In any
there are a few specialty stores, I think, that have it. You have to go to a Commonwealth or a British store.
Yeah, they definitely make you work to find it over here.
Indeed. No.
Yeah, sure. And you guys are talking about kangaroo, which is it's a good meat. I mean, it's becoming fairly mainstream now. When I was growing up, it wasn't in every deli, in every sort of supermarket, but now it is, and people like their kangaroo steaks, and a lot of people that are into weightlifting also enjoy it because it's good. It's a lean meat. I recently had a crocodile sub, which was to die for, and at the most unlikely, one of the most unlikely places. Like, you would never think that they would serve a croc sub. But just in Wollstonecraft, so in our North Shore, just at a cafe and looked at the menu, saw crocodile sub, and I was like, this can't be real. But sure enough, it was. And yeah, an experience for sure. Nothing like I've
Indeed.
ever tried.
And to clarify, whenever Jevon and I used to go out for dinner in Sydney, we usually went to Sri Lankan places. Had some hoppers, had some kotu, some things that are really hard to find over here, actually. But over there, as you were saying earlier, with the multicultural food scene, it's much more ubiquitous.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there is usually, I think we went to Homebush too, which is sort of a predominantly Sri Lankan area in Sydney, predominantly Sri Lankan suburb, where you really get the authenticity and the food that you would get if you traveled there. So yeah, I don't know, the interesting thing is whenever we went out to eat, it was not it was different every time. Like, so if we were studying late and we were, getting ready for exams, we'd fuel up at, say, a Greek restaurant one day, and then Sri Lankan restaurant, and it was Italian. It's just so diverse, and it's just you can kind of find whatever you're looking for. And then I think even in the last year we had an American place pop up too, which is good.
We did. Yeah. So transitioning off of food, because you're making me really hungry. Kind of moving into the classic Kiwi Aussie rivalry, because New Zealand likes to tout themselves as being the adventure capital of the world, and I think that Australia has a claim to that, clearly, in terms of rivaling that. So, what would you recommend for adventure travelers that don't know too much about Australia? Obviously, Uluru, Kakatua. There are lots of places off the beaten track. Give us some insight into that, please.
Yeah, I mean, I would go to Queensland. Like, I mean, that sounds like very blanket, but definitely, if you really want to see quintessential Australia, Queensland is the place to go. And even just in terms of what you were saying about adventuring and seeing great things and meeting great people. Hamilton Island, the Whitsundays. You can take a cruise around the Whitsundays and just stop off an island hop in a way and go snorkeling. That to me was like the pinnacle of my adventure experience within Australia. And we were only there for maybe about under a week, but yeah, just beautiful, pristine, turquoise waters in some respects, and white sands, like completely white and almost untouched. And to me that alone should sink New Zealand, but just or even Byron. One of the greatest things about being in lockdown was that it caused us to do a lot of local traveling. Last year, when we couldn't travel internationally, we'd planned to go abroad, and really, I think Japan was on the cards. We had a few different places we wanted to see, but we ended up having to restructure and to sort of regroup, and we did a lot of travel within the country. And we went to Byron Bay. I don't know if you've been, but
yep, great surfing destination.
Yeah, so culturally distinct and home to the Hemsworths, kind of like that. Really Australian Hollywood kind of decided that was the place to live. But even under COVID, the most amazing thing about Byron Bay was that it was just almost unaffected. And we went to a theater there; it was just packed, and in the middle of a pandemic. And probably because their case numbers were so low that it really hadn't touched them. But just traveling around there and going to restaurants where they wouldn't take reservations, yet they'd tell you to come back in like 3 hours because they were so popular. And I think it's the epitome of the Australian cool and just relaxed. And you'd see people walking around kind of vaping and just our yeah, just a very cool place to be, and great beaches. Although I do think the beaches in New South Wales are definitely the best in the nation. Especially the harbour beaches I was referencing before, that are not so talked about, but beautiful in their own right. But yeah, just a good place to travel if you're visiting Australia. It's one place that you shouldn't miss. And there's also nice little towns near there, Ninbin, where sort of an alcohol-free town, but marijuana positive. But yeah, just really quaint buildings, quaint houses, and just a very culturally distinct, big sort of hippie culture. But yeah, go into the stores there and yeah, just buy a few brownies.
So marijuana is legal in that area? I didn't know that you had any areas like that.
Well, we don't have, it's not legal as such, but it's not policed.
Okay,
If that makes sense. In Canberra, you can
decriminalize, right?
It's not. In Canberra, it's not an offence
Mhm.
to have marijuana. Distribution is an offence, but not possession. If that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, it does.
And if you're looking for something that's completely off the beaten track, and I haven't done this personally, but if you go past Cooktown all the way up in the far north Queensland, basically you can take a four-wheeler all the way up to Thursday Island, and a lot of it is just pristine white sand. It's actually the Torres Strait, and you can, I think you can see the southern tip of Papua from there, or maybe that's the Indonesian side. But that's really rugged, and you obviously have to have enough provisions and a four-wheeler to get you there and back, which takes a lot of planning. But that's just to state that if you want to drive the outback, for instance, that's an option. Or if you want to get lost in Western Australia and all of the the territory there, it's just such a vast continent that I think there's only a few roads that actually crisscross east, west, and north, south, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
I was actually going to take it the opposite direction and go south and ask if you've been to Tasmania or not.
I haven't, no. But it's definitely on the list, and a place I would definitely get to if when things start to open up. It's definitely, we've talked about it, and definitely my wife and I, it's definitely a place I want to travel. My wife's been, loved it. Awesome. But yeah, definitely going to go.
I went there just briefly. I went to Hobart, never been to Launceston. Tried to get to Launceston, but didn't want to drive on the opposite side of the road for 5 hours. I actually my fear kicked in there, guys. So there's talk about pushing the envelope. But
did you do much driving when you were in town?
I didn't. No, but I will next time. I've done it now in a few other countries, so I'm slightly more comfortable with it. But
I was terrified doing it in the States. I didn't do it.
It takes some getting used to.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You know, it cuts both ways, I guess. But no, I didn't. Unfortunately, didn't see any Tasmanian devils. That was top of the list. Gotta completely get out there at night and just really seek them out. They're not very approachable creatures. But I did see Port Arthur, of course. It's obviously known nowadays more for the worst mass shooting in Australian history, tragically.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of history there in terms of the British, penal colonies, fort, etc. So there's actually a lot to see in Tasmania. And if you think about it, Tasmania is pretty much the last stop before Antarctica. You'll see a few really remote, uninhabited islands between there and, should we say, the furthest continent. But it's really off on its own. And it definitely has a sort of a mentality to it. I think it might even come through in James Bogue, the beer.
Possibly does. And you mentioned James Bogue, but I've had a lot of friends travel to Tasmania because they have some of the best music festivals and different cultural festivities that happen there. So and Burning Man-esque sort of rites and rituals. So yeah, no, you mentioned James Bogue, but we are also a massive next to wine, a beer culture as well. So we love our craft beers here, and that's another great a great sort of component to our to our culture, in that yeah, just the pick of the litter in terms of beer. So if you're into beer, come this way.
Indeed, and also Bundy. Don't forget Bundaberg rum from QLD, and they'd one of their claims to fame.
Yeah. And when you're drinking Bundaberg rum, one thing that you have to make sure to do is to shake it before you drink it.
I did not know that.
Why is that?
A great tip.
Particles at the bottom. You don't really see them. It's just this white, like very light white that you can see. You shake it up so it surfaces.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's just one of those things. I had it when I had it the first time. I didn't do it. Then I did it subsequent occasions, and the experience was different. So
I know we're getting close to the lightning round here. I just wanted to ask real quick, and it might be a lesser known fact. Have you ever taken advantage of the winter season and maybe some of the snow and ski snowboarding options?
I have, but not for a long time. I've Threadbow being so close, and the Jindabyne being very close to where we are. I think some of my fondest memories are going to a cabin there and going snowboarding, going up the ski lift, and that was terrifying. I do remember one occasion when for whatever reason, the bar didn't come down, the protective sort of, what you'd say, the protective
Restraint,
bar that,
yeah,
and we went all the way up without it, and we just cuddled tightly, and that was a bunch of kids, and that was terrifying, but a beautiful thing to see, and something that you should do as well, if you're out here, and yeah, just it's a seasonal thing, but something we definitely enjoyed as part of our youth, for sure.
And something else as well. What would you classify Australia price-wise? Usually more on the expensive side in terms of general activities, accommodation, things of that nature.
It's a big range. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking to sort of experience adventure, then and just enjoy and spend most of your budget on, say, the experiences themselves as opposed to the accommodation, then it's not. There's definitely options available for every end of the spectrum, really. We do have the luxury sort of stuff, the luxury accommodation, and then down to just very backpacker resorts and that kind of thing. Well, not backpacker resorts, youth hostels. They're all sort of out and about. So yeah, you could stay in Sydney on the cheap, or you could do it high end. It really depends on what you're interested in. If you want to sort of devote most of your budget to the experience, then you can definitely cut back on the accommodation. So yeah, no, and you could almost do that everywhere in the country. It's not just in Sydney. So I'm saying Sydney because that's my experience, but I'm aware of the same existing in other states, in other cities and states. Yeah.
And I've met numerous travelers also that have taken advantage of some woofing options as well. So work for accommodation. So all throughout Australia, from my understanding. So there are some options to do it on the cheap. Getting there is an entirely different story, though.
Yeah. I mean, getting there for you guys and for our European friends is a bit of a journey. But the same goes for us too. I mean, I've been to the States a couple of times before lockdown, and yeah, that was quite a trek.
Worth it.
Yeah.
Worth it for sure.
This
is definitely making me wish that the borders were open. We can get there tomorrow. So
Where can you guys can visit the Caribbean and sort of nearby places, right? Like that's sort of back.
We can. In fact, Winfield, you're heading out pretty soon, right?
Yes, it really depends on the country. Europe is by and large open up, save a few exceptions. The Caribbean's largely been open. Mexico's open. So it really depends. There's a wide range, and there's a wide range of testing requirements and quarantine requirements. So we could do a whole episode on that.
We could for sure. And, we're all kind of just keeping our eyes glued to, what changes on a daily basis. It's important to note that we are, recording this in August of 2021. So you never know what September is going to bring in the following months. I've scheduled to go down to Peru in September, and keeping my fingers crossed that that's going to work out. So we will see.
Yeah.
So I think it's time. Drum roll. And Winfield, you have those questions handy, right?
I do. Here we go. So this is time for our signature lightning round, Jevon. 10 questions coming at you. First thought that comes to mind. You ready?
Yep.
One wish, what would it be?
To travel the world.
Which country do you want to visit the most today, and why?
Japan. I've never been there.
Okay. What's one thing in Australia you still really want to do?
Sorry, I missed that one.
What's one thing in Australia you still really want to do?
See, I want to take selfies with the quokkas.
Okay, very good. Strangest thing you've ever eaten?
Crocodile sub.
Okay, that tops it. That's pretty good, I have to say.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about Australia?
The people.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that in this episode, and that's very true. Is that as much as the hard time and they'll give you for being a Yank or for being from Europe or wherever, deep down they are affable.
It all comes from a good place for sure, at least.
Definitely does, yeah. We make fun of you guys out of love.
Well, thank you.
Likewise, it's a two-way street.
It is a two-way street.
What's the must-see attraction in Australia?
Ooh, Harbour Bridge.
Yeah,
this is still lightning, right? So I'm trying.
Yeah, this is still lightning. Yeah, you're in the midst of it.
In the midst of it.
One tip you have for travelers?
Talk to a barista.
Very good. That's a great one. What motivates you to travel?
Just being so far away from everything. Also being an Australian-born Sri Lankan, being someone from a different, someone whose ancestry goes to a different country. It just makes me want to see the world and really experience different cultures and meet great people.
Very good. Which mode or modes of transport do you recommend for Australia?
Drive. Just get a car and drive around, I reckon. Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
There's one experience in your life that you could relive. What would it be?
Skydiving.
And on that note, finally, skydiving out of an airplane onto the beach in New South Wales, right? Jarvis Bay. That's
no, and this is really gonna alienate the Australian base a little bit, but I did that in New Zealand. Sorry.
Dun, dun, dun.
That is a perfect ending. Yeah. Cue the wah, right?
I just have one quick question because we kind of breezed over this. Why a barista in particular?
What? Why over? Sorry.
Why a barista? Why is that your one travel tip?
Yeah. Because they're full of tips. I mean, you wouldn't think it, and there's no scientific way of sort of corroborating my claim, but I've never gone wrong having done that just wherever I've been, and they've always been able to give me a good list of things to do, and some things that are not very touristy, some things that are more lifestyle as well. So it's just always good to keep your ears open to them, and they never run short of good tips.
Awesome.
And yeah, the ones I've spoken to anyway, you could have a different experience. So
one way to find out.
One way to find
Exactly.
out. Yeah, give it a try.
Put yourself out there. Well,
Yeah.
Jevon, thanks so much for your time today. We had a great time bantering about our foibles of yesteryear, and for everybody out there, hope you got some unique insights into Australia and some trip planning advice for the future.
Yeah, thank you guys, and really appreciate you both having me on. You guys just live it up and enjoy your travel away. When are you traveling?
I'm heading out next weekend, actually. So right around the corner.
Where are you going?
Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Moldova,
Ooh.
Romania, Bulgaria, a little bit Slovakia as well. So yeah, it's going to be action packed.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. All right, well, enjoy, guys. Have a good one, and thanks again for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Cheers,
you very
man. Great
much.
to see you. Take care.
It was great to meet you. Hopefully in person one day, sometime soon.
Hopefully soon. Bye.
What a great conversation with Jevon. Just learned so much, not only about the continent, but the people, the wealth of experiences, but animal life, and just so many adventures that are really off the beaten track that you really can't find anywhere else on Earth. Australia is truly a country onto its own.
Yeah, that was awesome. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be trying crocodile anytime soon, but that just goes with the whole adventurous spirit of the Aussies down south. So really appreciate Jevon coming on, and thank you guys for listening. As always, you can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Reach out to us on social media. We're at Locales Unknown on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We're at contact@localesunknown.com. Hey, quick favor. If you guys like the episode, just drop us a comment or let us know how we're doing. And if you have any suggestions, we're here to listen. This is your podcast. We want to make sure that we cover all the topics you want to hear. Thanks again, guys. We'll talk to you soon.